What is up, everybody? Welcome to week 44 of It's Sportsis. My name is Christine. I am your average Joe Schmo when it comes to sports knowledge, and I am here to ask all the questions that you have at home.
And I am Sarah, your self-proclaimed sports expert, and I am here to answer all of the questions that Christine has, and hopefully all of those questions that you have at home. This week, Christine, we are talking fantasy football, and I feel like this is kind of a hot topic in that mainly the women of the world, when they hear fantasy football, it's literally like
An eye roll, 150%.
total eye roll.
Michael, my husband, has been waiting for us to talk fantasy football because he loves fantasy football.
Yes.
He plays in 3 different leagues every
wow.
single year. And I'm excited to kind of dive deeper into it, for one, so I can learn a little bit more with you guys, because I'm not going to lie, fantasy football frustrates me.
Yeah, because it's not like you just are watching a game and you want one team to win. You don't care about the team. You want your player on your fantasy team to do well. So
Right. So we can be the biggest Panthers fans in the world, but when you play fantasy, if the Panthers are playing against one of your players, then you're going to cheer for the player on the other team.
Maybe. I mean, I could never do that, which is why I've never played fantasy, but
Sarah, me too.
all of this to say, Christine, I feel like we need to jump into what is it? Who is it? When is it? All of the things, who, what, when, where, why, and how.
So let's start with the who. So who plays fantasy football?
I mean, anybody can play. I mean, basically there are different programs to use fantasy football. ESPN and Yahoo are the most popular, and each like league or each, program, Yahoo, ESPN, whatever, has their own like varying rules, but they don't vary that much. It's just like the number of people you can have on a team, the number of positions that you can keep, things like that. And so I have like ish in a lot of these answers because it will vary based on the program that you use, but it's they're all very similar. All of the rules are very, very similar.
And usually it's, you find people that you want to play with. 9 times out of 10, you find your friends, you start a league. You can play for money. I don't know if that's necessarily legal or not, but you can play for money in your league, and you all put it into a pot. And at the end of the season, whoever wins gets the jackpot.
Yes. But I mean, honestly, it's mainly for bragging rights. Like,
Michael has a trophy.
Yeah, exactly. And he probably displays it. Like if he could put it above your bed, he would do that. Like that's how big of a big deal this is, because it's basically like, okay, so what is fantasy football, right? In simple terms, it's putting together a team of who you think would be the best team of all time. So remove the team logos from the players. You're putting together a group of players that would be your fantasy team, which is why it's called fantasy football.
Correct. But you don't get to just pick any player. So you're put into a draft, right, Sarah?
Yes. Yeah. So
how do you get like first pick?
It depends on, okay. So yes, you're put into a draft. And the draft takes place usually after the preseason and prior to the first regular season, which is usually like Labor Day night. So usually like a 3-day time frame where it's like peak draft season, right?
Right.
So the draft order, there's normally like around 10 people in any given league. And the draft order is like, how is it selected? I don't know.
I think it's random.
I was going to say it's either random or it's selected by everybody. It's literally like you pull names out of a hat and that's who gets to go first. But I think it's a snake draft. So if you pick first, and then you don't pick again until
everyone's gone.
Everybody's gone back. So like 1 through 10, and then 10 gets to go again.
Oh, really?
And then 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you want the first pick, because
that's the cream of the crop. You get the best player.
That's right. And so the first pick is normally a running back. And let me tell you why. So usually as, somebody who watches football, you think of the best player on the field as the quarterback, right? So there's 32 teams in the NFL, but each team has a great quarterback. So quarterbacks are kind of like, yeah, you want a good one, but there's a lot of good ones. Whereas running backs, like, you want a good one and there aren't a lot of good ones. And so you will see usually the running backs go first. And number one on everybody's mock draft right now, Christine, is guess.
Christian McCaffrey.
Everybody wants Christian McCaffrey. He's number 22, you guys. He's dating Olivia Culpo. He is a player for the Carolina Panthers and he has biceps the size of my head and he's beautiful and he's so
Sarah, in case you guys aren't watching this on YouTube, is just sitting there twirling her hair, daydreaming about Christian McCaffrey.
Yes. So obviously everybody wants to pick him first in fantasy because he's going to get them the most points. But
right.
Also for you guys that are going to dabble in a fantasy football league this year, not too terrible to look at and not too, rough around the edges, if you know what I mean. He's literally just an amazing human being, beautiful inside out. I mean, great.
And does well with fantasy, like the top running back in the league.
Yes, exactly. So running backs get chosen first.
Okay. So running backs typically get chosen first. And then obviously you pick positions and players and other positions that you just think are the best from that point forward. That's going to score you the most points, correct?
Yes. So the goal of fantasy football is to score more points than your opponent. So each week, let's say there are usually around 10. I have 10-ish in the notes. There are 10-ish players in a fantasy football league, right? Each week you are paired up and are playing against another one of those players.
And you're talking players and you're talking friends. You're in the league. You're not talking about actual football players.
Teams. I guess so there are 10 people that choose 10 different fantasy football teams in the fantasy football league. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So of those 10 teams, there are 10 people that are leading those teams. They are paired off into, here we are with my fingers again, into competitions, into games every week. And whoever gets gets more points of those pairings, of those 5 pairings each week, wins the week and it's added to your record. So your record wins, loses. And then at the end, whoever has the best records get to go to the playoffs.
Okay. So whoever's player, you're going up against one of your friends. That's another team in your league, right?
That's
so you're going up against one other person and their players that they've chosen.
Yes.
It gets a little confusing when I'm speaking it out loud.
No, yes. So your team, your fantasy team that you have chosen on draft night, made up of a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and a flex position, which is usually a running back, wide receiver, or a tight end. And a kicker. So a kicker is on there. And a defense. Yes, sorry. And a defense.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, because I remember Michael had like an entire team's defense last year.
Yes. Okay. So it is made up. Let me list those again. So you've got a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex position, a defense, and a kicker. So
what is considered a flex position?
A flex position is usually a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end, but you cannot pick up another quarterback.
Okay. So you can have multiple of other positions except for quarterback.
Yes.
And except for defense, I would assume.
Yes. You have 1 defense, but you also have a bench. So you have 7 or 9-ish starters, again, depending on what program you're using, 7-ish bench players. Okay. Your bench is made up of, pretty much whomever you want to be on your bench, right? You could stack 7 quarterbacks on your bench if you want to, but the reason why you have a bench is because if your starter has a bye, so a bye is, a break that week, and they're not playing or they're injured, you need to have those bench players to be able to sub in for your core group of starters.
Or if just your starter that you thought was going to perform amazing is just sucking and not getting you any points.
That too.
Then you can bench your starter for no other reason other than they're sucking to then put in another player from your bench. So it is important to have those players on your bench, like you said, and there's 7 of them, right?
Yes.
So 9 starters, 7 bench.
Yes. 9 starters, 7 bench. So you guys, we're still talking about the draft. Okay. And draft nights. These are huge in fantasy football, right? It's like the time of the year that everybody picks their fantasy football team, right? So I did a little math, and if 12 players, I rounded up to 12 because I think ideal team is 10, but you can have up to 14. So if 12 players.
So you mean 12 people in a league?
Oh, sorry. If 12 people in the league, there are 12 people in the league, and each one used the 2 minutes allotted for the draft.
Because you only have 2 minutes to pick a player.
Because you have 2 minutes to pick a player. So if each person used the 2 minutes allowed for all 16 positions, the entire draft would take 6 hours and like 35 minutes.
Honestly, though, they do take a long time.
Yes. Okay. But that being said, they're going to be
not that long.
No, not that long. And like, I was like doing the math with Travis, and we were like dying laughing because there's so many, like, especially the first couple of rounds, they're no brainers. Like if your player, the next best player is available, like you're going to snag them within like 10 seconds of your 2 minute allotment. So it won't take you the full 2 minutes to make a decision every single time. But think about it, you guys, like I said, number 1 picks. And then I mean, really, like I said, they could take 2 minutes if they wanted to pick. But it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's go up to 12, 11, 12, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's 2 rounds.
Yeah. And there's 16, right?
There's 16 positions. Yeah. 16 rounds that they're going to need to stack their team with. That's correct.
But the drafting can be really fun because if everybody lives in the same place, and even if everybody doesn't, like Michael loves to have or try to plan, like either if nobody lives in the same place or only a couple people do, like plan a trip. So it's like a draft trip. So all the boys meet together in a place and have a whole weekend just to do their draft.
Yeah, I know. It is fun. I mean, I have a little sour taste in my mouth because last year, Travis and I were at the City Club at his very first Vintners wine night. And we had just become members of this, like, it's like a social club, you guys, is the best way to describe it. It sounds bougie. We're like the least bougie people.
It does sound bougie as hell.
We're the least bougie people in there. Anyway, so we roll up in there and I'm there to drink wine. I'm super excited about it. And I bring Travis with me, even though he doesn't really drink wine. And it's freaking fantasy football draft night for one of his leagues.
Oh yeah. So all the men were there. I'm sure they were like all loaded in the cigar lounge. Like,
no, he didn't have, and he was doing it remotely.
Wait, who?
Travis.
Oh, I thought you meant it was fantasy draft night at the City Club.
No.
Like they were having like an event for it.
It was Vintners night at the City Club, and Travis came with me to Vintners night, which is like a wine tasting.
Oh, that's so boring.
And he has like 2 or 3 of his phones out on the table.
Yeah.
And he's using one for research and one to pick, and he's not conversing with anybody at the table. And so I just drank all of his wine.
Yeah, Sarah, that's so funny because the first time, Michael, it was like at the beginning of our relationship before I really understood fantasy draft because I've never played fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh yeah, I'll go with you to the restaurant. Like we can go get dinner. You can do your draft. He was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we go there And he's sitting on his computer the whole time. And I'm sitting there eating my mashed potatoes, just staring at him like, this is so boring and not what I thought at all.
Don't want to sit here and just stare at you,
In
stare at your
silence.
computer. Yeah, in silence. Because they've got so much going on the other side of that computer or on their phone. Like they're researching players, who's left, who's gone, when am I coming up next? How long do I have?
Right. You get like the occasional, like he would occasionally be like, oh, come on, he took my player. Like that's pretty much like the only words I got out of him for those entire, like it took like 2.5, 3 hours.
I know, it's absolutely ridiculous. So we said, when is fantasy football? It's the entire regular season of the NFL regular season.
Okay. And we talked about how you win fantasy football and you score more points than the other team.
You score more points. Your team scores more points than the other team, and you accumulate over the weeks a record, and the best records go to fantasy playoffs.
And then,
the fantasy playoffs are the last 3-ish games of the NFL regular season, and only like the top, I think like 75% of the teams in your league go to the playoffs, right? And then it's sudden death. So those matchups,
sudden death.
Those matchups, if you lose, you're out.
You out.
Oh, why do I do things with my hands all
I don't know, but it's like you always have some new movement with your fingers.
I think it helps my brain. I don't know why I do that.
Expressive.
Yes. So anyway, let's move on to winning, because that's what people play fantasy football for, and not just to win, but also to see one of their friends lose, because the loser, like the person who comes in last place in fantasy football, I'll have to share with you guys some videos.
Yes. Oh my gosh, they're mortifying.
Yes, but they
completely humiliating.
Christine, sometimes they have to get tattoos on their bodies.
I would never.
But I mean, you agreed to it before you even start the fantasy football leagues. You're like, there's no way I'm going to be in last.
Yeah. There's videos of like men in like all pink tutus, like standing on a corner, like waving to people in his shame, holding a sign that says like, I came in last.
Yes, I came in last in fantasy football. Like it is a huge deal. And yes, as much money as people spend on betting on their teams and putting money into pots, like all they want, I feel like all of my friends who have ever done fantasy football leagues want, is bragging rights, and definitely not to get in last, because nobody will ever forget that. Like as much as nobody forgets that you win, nobody for sure is ever going to forget that you got in last, because you're going to have to do something so humiliating that it's going to be caught on camera, and you're going to get reminded about it every single year.
We should do some league. We like Sarah and I have never ever done fantasy football because again, it just kind of like makes you cheer against your team sometimes. However, it's also really fun because it helps you in games that you wouldn't typically care about.
That's what I love about fantasy football.
Yeah, you have so many players to cheer for, and it makes it so much more entertaining.
Like I said, you guys
otherwise wouldn't care about.
Yeah, your team is made up of a bunch of different players from a bunch of different teams. So like your kicker and your defense might be on different teams. And so you might want, your defense. So they might be playing each other that week, right? And so you want your defense to stop the ball. So then that way your kicker that's on this team kicks a lot of field goals and makes a lot of field goals. So you're cheering for like a really weird scenario usually, but it's a lot of fun. And I agree with you. I think we need to do something this year.
Our friend Joe was telling us about like, instead of like having an entire league, because you can only invite so many people. And I know a lot of our sis squad, like thinking about the bracket challenge that we did for NCAA basketball, we had a lot of people join that, which I loved.
I know.
So I don't think that a league, because you're cut off at a certain number of people, right?
Well,
so
and the ideal number is 10. That's just not enough. I mean, with the two of us, there's 8 left, right? And our husbands can't help themselves. They're going to want to try and jump in and try and win the whole thing, which they're not.
They're definitely not. So, but there is something that our friend Joe was telling us about, that you can do it on a weekly basis instead of doing a league.
Yeah. I think it's
DraftKings.
Yeah, it's through DraftKings. And I don't think you don't have to bet if you don't want to. I know DraftKings has like this, it's like a sports book kind of a reputation, but you don't have to bet. So you can, if you want to, you can put money in it if you want to, or you don't have to. So we'll look into it. We'll let you guys know on the Instagram story. And you can join. You should join. It'll be fun.
Yeah, let's put it on the story.
Okay.
And see who wants to join, because that would be a lot of fun. We'd all be doing it. I mean, I'm sure maybe you guys have already done fantasy football, but it'll be Sarah and I's first time. So I think it'd be a fun way to dabble in it.
I don't want to lose.
Well, I don't want to lose either.
And I want to like make somebody, Christine, whoever loses, we should come up with something really good. Not like too bad or too embarrassing. Just
not
like
too
really
humiliating, but a little humiliating that they have to put on their Instagram story.
Yes. And then we can repost.
We'll have to brainstorm that.
Okay. Yeah. Good idea.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up this week's episode of It's Sports Sis. Thank you guys for listening. We love you. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.